Hey guys, welcome to Between Two Rooks. In this video, we're watching the most exciting and nerve-wracking game of this century, Fabiano Caruana versus Ian Nepomniachti. First of all, let me tell you why this game is so important. That was the last round of the candidates tournament, and both Jan and Fabi were half a point behind the leader, Gukesh. So they both had to win to still have a chance to qualify for the World Chess Championship. Uh, I'm gonna keep the evaluation bar open so that you can see how many mistakes both players made. And that's okay because they're human beings. That was a very important round for both of them. And yes, they made tons of mistakes. The game was still very complicated, and I'm gonna do my best to try and simplify it for you and explain the key moments. So let's get started. Nepo, okay. Fabi played with white pieces and he decided to go g4, and Nepo chose a line with the declined queen's gambit so that he played bishop b4, and that already says that he wasn't going to play for a draw. Neither of them wanted to draw this game, but bishop b4 is not the best one for black. He was just trying to create some imbalances in this position. And that was obvious because after e3, he played h6, and then he attacked the bishop again, and then he played knight e4. And you can already see that the position is not standard. This is already a bit crazy. So after queen c2, protecting the knight on c3, Nepo plays h5. So he kind of wants to trap this bishop on g3 by playing h4 in the future. After f3, knight takes, pawn takes, and the pawn structure is already not standard. It's not really common to have this position at all. Bishop e6, Fabi develops bishop d3, c6, castle, knight d7, and now Fabi plays f4. And he kind of wants to trap the bishop on e6. So the position is already a little bit weird. Nepo plays bishop g4, and here both players starts making mistakes. So white plays knight f3, and the computer doesn't really like this move. It says that it allows black to develop normally. Instead, white should have played bishop e2, which is really hard to understand for just normal human beings. So after knight f3, Nepo makes a mistake himself. He plays queen e7, and even though the computer doesn't really think that was a mistake, that was not an accurate move, simply because it's not good to place your queen and your king on the same file like that. Um, Nepo should have played pawn f4 because once again this g5 pawn is going to be very weak in the future. So he had to take on f4 when he could, and then he had to play bishop f3, take again, and queen f6. So in this position, after rook e1, Nepo was supposed to be okay with king d8. Instead of castling, he would just locate his king on c7, and then he would target d4 pawn and f4 pawn, maybe by playing pawn to h4. And that is an equal position, and black has an easy play in comparison to white. But this is real hard to understand for human beings. However, queen e7 is definitely not good because now Fabi has an easier play. He plays e4, and Nepo makes another inaccurate move in a row. He takes on c3. So instead, he should have considered taking on e4 while he could, and then taking on f4, getting rid of this weakness on g5, which has been attacked 2 times already. But all the lines are very complicated to understand. So let's just see what happened in the game. After bishop takes c3, queen took back, bishop takes f3, and Nepo made a d takes e4 move, which is considered to be very strong according to the computer, but it's super hard to understand for human beings because the game is easier for white. In my opinion, white has an easier game here, and Fabi sacrifices his pawn. He doesn't take on f4, instead he plays pawn g4. And white has problems. White has serious problems. They castle, but it's really, really easy to play with white pieces. I think you can find the next move if you want to. It's just d5, right? I mean, you start the attack, the queen is looking at the black king, and you want to take on c6 and checkmate afterwards. So Nepo thinks for a while, and then he decides to play pawn to h4, creating a backup pass pawn, which I like to call it. So guys, this is the pawn that's gonna really save the game for black pieces. The only thing that matters in this game is this pawn. It created enough counterplay for black later on. But Fabi takes on c6 now. Knight c5, bishop f5 check. And after king goes to b8, Fabi makes a very cool move. I really liked it. He plays king to b1. And that move kind of says, what are you gonna do, Jan? There is nothing you can do. Every move you make is gonna just worsen your position. All pieces are stuck for black. So even queen cannot move anywhere. It protects the knight. And maybe this is why Nepo played pawn to b6, worsening his position even more. Fabi finds a very cool move. He plays rook d7. This move ruins the coordination of black pieces. So let's say the knight takes. If the knight takes, white just plays c7, and after king goes to a8, white can checkmate queen c6. So if king goes to b7, white can promote to a knight even. And here they have an absolutely winning position. They have an absolutely winning position with black just simply losing like this. So b6 was terrible, rook d7, and this is where Nepo took with the rook, and Fabi took with the pawn. Now he has a pass pawn on d7, and black cannot take it back right away because the rook h8 is hanging. So white is just winning here. Nepo has to play a rook to d8, blocking the pawn. But that means that white is happy. They just play queen d4, protecting the pawn a little bit, improving their queen, and threatening taking on f4. So after knight takes, rook d1, now knight d7 is gonna be pinned. And if they just make a normal, I don't know, any move, you can just take on d7. So this is why they play queen c5, offering a trade. Of course, white doesn't want to take it. They take on f4 instead. Check. And after queen c7, queen g2, keeping pressure on this knight. Nepo plays pawn h3, which is super cool, guys. And the reason is you cannot take on d7 now. If you do, this h2 pawn is gonna cause you some trouble. So I believe they can play even h2. And even though white is still winning, this is a pawn that has enough compensation for the sacrificed knight. So instead here, after h3, white plays bishop e4, using the weakness of the white squares. So the next move would be queen d5, threatening the checkmate on a8. Let's see, a5, queen d5. We want to checkmate on a8, so black plays king a7, defense from everything. But now white takes another pawn, and the game is very simple for white. So one more moment I forgot to mention that in this position, even though the material is equal, white is dominating this game. Black pieces are so stuck. They all have to defend the knight. The pawns are not protected. The king isn't safe. White is definitely winning here. You can see that Fabi was +5. And here, white even has more material, and all they have to do is to stop the h pawn from coming, and then push their f and g pawns up and promote. But the problem is, Fabi had 7 minutes on his clock, and here the game gets even more interesting. h2, as I told you, this pawn is gonna play a very important role in this game. Queen h7, stopping the pawn. King b8, a3, a very cool move because in some variations, if Fabi decided to play rook h1 first, trying to gain the pawn, black would have enough counterplay by knight f6, and then maybe here they would also have a move rook g1. So you don't want to take this pawn right away. After pawn a3, black plays queen e5, white plays queen h6, with some ideas to play queen c6 in the future. But I want you to see that Fabi has 2 minutes on his clock, so the game is insane. Nepo plays queen c7, protecting from queen c6 move, and now g5. An easy game for white, they can just push their pawn. But here, Nepo plays rook g8. Time to play rook h1 and take this pawn, right? Why not? If black doesn't have any counterplay, they cannot win this game. They have no chance to win this game without counterplay. And now black plays knight c5. And here Fabio makes a mistake. He can just play bishop f5, or maybe he can play bishop to c2. Either way, he's gonna just take the pawn next move and maybe play g6 and then play f4, and he's winning. Instead he played bishop h7. Of course, the move looks natural because he attacks the rook on g8, but if the rook just goes away, white wins. They can just take on h2 and they have no problems whatsoever. But here goes the next stage of the game. Nepo plays rook to g5, and I consider this to be a great move because black changes the game. They have enough counterplay by sacrificing the exchange. White takes and black takes on h7. They took it back, and now even though white has a rook, the rook is stuck on h1. When black has a knight on c5, and knights are very tricky. And they have a pass pawn on h2. So black has enough counterplay. This is move number 41. Fabi got his 30 minutes and now he can think. But he makes a mistake that a lot of people make when they play. On move number 40, instead of taking a lot of time to think, he just makes a quick move. I want you to see that the king is checked on b1 and he needs to decide where to go. He goes king a1 and that changes the evaluation of the position. He was supposed to play king a2, and this is very hard to explain. Let's just say that by playing king a2, he makes the queen check him again, and now the queen doesn't protect the pawn. So after the king goes back, knight b3, king b1, we get to the position, the same position, but the pawn h2 is not protected, and we can take it. And once again, without this pawn, black has um, nothing to attack with, nothing to scare white pieces with. So let's just say that after queen h7, king goes to a2, and now there is no more check for black, and white just attacks the knight, and next move can be queen g3 check and taking the pawn on h2. I remind you that instead Fabi played king to a1. And by making this move, he gave his opponent, he gave Jan enough counterplay. He plays queen c2, and this is so scary to have your opponent's queen being so close to your king, and their knight is coming to b3 at any point. And the queen is also protecting h2 pawn, which is super, super scary. Check, king a2, a4. So the white king is kinda stuck on a2, and there are so many chances that black has now. The position is very close to equal because the pawn is on h2, the queen is in front of the king. There are some ways to threaten the checkmate on b2, or maybe play queen b3, and if the rook goes somewhere, queen d1 and queen b3. Either way, black has drawing ideas as well as checkmating ideas, and this is scary to play with white pieces now. Fabi plays f4. There's not real much to do. He's supposed to just push his pawn to f4 and maybe create another passed pawn. However, here Jan makes a mistake. He was supposed to play king a6 and say, as Fabi did earlier on when he played king b1 in the middle game. Jan could have said, okay, what are you gonna do now? But instead, let's just say if he plays king a6, if Fabi plays f5, then Jan has knight g3 move. And by playing knight g3, he threatens the checkmate, and if something happens, he's just gonna go knight c1 check, and then knight b3, knight c1, knight b3, giving a perpetual check. So that would be very, very interesting. But instead of king a6, Jan plays knight b3. And knight b3 is a mistake. Let's see what happens now. Check. Queen offers a trade, and of course black doesn't want to trade. They have zero chances after trading. So the queen is safe. It escapes the trade, and now white checks again, and rook e1. So that was hard to spot for black. But now, because he played knight b3 too early, he allowed the white rook to escape the h1 square. And now black cannot promote even if they wanted to. White checkmates, rook e7, queen c7, and queen c8, our favorite ladder checkmate. So instead, in this position, Fabi plays knight c5, blocking the checkmate. Queen f1, offering a trade, king escapes, queen f5. The position is still very tricky even though the computer again says that white is winning. Queen c2, queen is very close, but unfortunately it's not scary because c1 square is well guarded by both pieces. f5, knight g3 threatening a checkmate, rook protects, and f6. Check, king escapes, normal check, knight g2, queen h1, blocking the pawn and attacking the king at the same time. King escapes, so rook b1 is hanging, Fabi plays rook c1, queen b3, king a1, and after queen e6, Fabi has 6 minutes again, and he makes a completely normal human's move. He plays rook to c7. You can see that it completely changes the position again. He was supposed to make an unhuman move, rook d1, and after knight b3 go back king b1 and play this position. But you have to admit rook c7 looks absolutely normal. Nothing to say. So after king goes to a6, turns out that after f7 pawn, Nepo has a perpetual check idea. And this is an endgame study idea practically, simply because after knight b3, king b1, he can do knight d2, but he plays queen f5. Queen f5. So he could do knight g2 check again. King doesn't want to go back. That would be a free for repetition at some point after knight b3. So king has to go out with maybe c2, for example. And turns out that neither rook nor queen can help the white king. So black can sacrifice their knight and keep chasing the white king throughout the board. And this is insane. Let me show you an example of it. Check, 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 check again. And even if it goes to e2, we still have e6, and there is nothing white can do about it. So that was a very, very cool perpetual check idea that looked like an endgame study, not a game. And Nepo missed it. He made a normal check, queen f5. And now white is winning again. King a2. So now black doesn't want to go queen e6 back simply because after queen a8, king b5, he has queen e8 move. That's a check and he offers a trade, so black has to take. And after they take, you can see that white is simply winning. So after king a2, black couldn't play queen e6. They played knight c5, which gives white enough time to play. So Fabi plays queen a8, gains some time by playing queen a8 again, king b5, he repeats the position. And now I believe he makes another mistake. He plays queen c6. It's a miss. It's a miss and it's a draw. If king goes to a6, and that's what happened, white cannot play queen a8. If they do, that would be a free for repetition. That would be a draw. So instead, here, Fabi was supposed to find queen e8 move, which is so hard to spot. The idea is that after queen e8, the queen can maneuver to e2 and take on h2. Let's just say if king goes to a6, you go check, and then you take on h2. And as I said already a million times, without this pawn, black is helpless. But if king went to a5 instead, we give this check, and then we give another check, queen e2. Either way, white was winning here, but Fabi missed it. And after that, he didn't really have much chance to win the game. King a6, rook e7, queen f1, and after queen f1, black threatens checkmate on their own, queen c4, and then he could promote h1 queen, for example, if white makes any random move, queen d6, then queen c4 would be winning after queen h1, that would be a checkmate. So queen c4 is a threat, and then there could be checkmating ideas. And this is why Fabi repeats the position for a couple of times, and then he finally plays rook e4, guarding the c4 square and offering his rook for a knight. After knight takes, queen takes on a4 first, and he gives many checks again, and then transfers the position to the queen endgame. And here that's unfortunately a draw. Even though they played for 30 more moves, that's a draw because black would not trade queens. White can win if they trade queens or they make some progress with pushing their pawns. They cannot really push their pawns much simply because the king would be weak and black queen would be checking the king all the time. So instead, let's just see what happens. They played for a little while, and after an offer of a trade, black just refuses it. And white has no progress to make. They play for a little bit longer, nothing happens, and eventually they agreed to draw the game on, let me say on move number 109. They agreed to draw the game, and you can see how crazy it is, how insane the game was. So Fabiano Caruano had a winning position throughout the game, but he blew his chances many times. And Nepo showed a very courageous game. Yes, he didn't really have a chance to win it because the position was actually lost for him from the beginning. But he didn't resign, and he created some counterplay that was so hard to deal with. And unfortunately for both of them, they didn't qualify for the Watches Championship. Hopefully you enjoyed this crazy game. I really enjoyed it, and that was insane to calculate the variations in the end game and middle game. Hopefully see you in the next videos, and let me know what you think about this game in the comment section down below.